The process began with Lysandra channeling her energy through the crystalline matrix they had constructed. Nolan, wearing the interface suit, stepped into the center of the energy field. As the quantum harmonizers activated, the boundary between them began to blur, not erasing their differences, but creating a spectrum where both could exist. Pain and ecstasy merged as Nolan felt his consciousness expand beyond its human limitations. Lysandra experienced the novel sensation of containment, of edges and boundaries to her infinite nature. Their essences intertwined, neither fully energy nor fully matter, but something unprecedented. When the transformation stabilized, Nolan stood changed, his body suffused with a violet luminescence that pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat. Beside him, Lysandra had gained partial solidity, her energy condensed into a more defined form that radiated power without destruction. "How do you feel?" she asked, her voice now audible without the painful harmonics that had once accompanied it. "More," Nolan replied simply. "Everything is in more." When the rescue ship landed, its crew was greeted by a sight beyond their comprehension. A human man with energy flowing beneath his skin, hand in hand with a violet-hued being who seemed to exist between states of matter. "I won't be returning with you," Nolan informed the astonished captain, "but I would appreciate if you'd deliver messages to my family." Later, as the ship departed, Nolan and Lysandra stood at the edge of the crystalline structure that had been his sanctuary and was now their home. "What happens now?" she asked. Nolan smiled, the expression lighting his transformed features from within. "Now we explore. The universe looks different through both our eyes." He reached for her, their transformed natures allowing contact that would have once been impossible. In the space between them, not human, not cosmic, but a harmony of both. They had found something neither had believed possible, a love that transcended the very fabric of existence. As the nebula swirled around them in shades of violet and blue, Lysandra rested her head against Nolan's shoulder, feeling the steady rhythm of his partially transformed heart. "Will you regret this choice?" she whispered. "When centuries pass and your human world changes beyond recognition?" Nolan looked out at the cosmos that awaited them. Stars and planets and phenomena no human had witnessed, experiences no energy being had shared. "I never wanted a normal life," he said, the violet light within him pulsing with certainty. "I wanted an extraordinary one." And in the vast expanse of the Cathveri Nebula, two beings who should never have been able to coexist had found not just connection, but transformation, proof that even the most fundamental differences could be bridged when the desire to understand outweighed the fear of change. Together, neither fully what they had been nor entirely new, they stepped into their shared future, boundless as the stars themselves. The end. "If I undress, will you touch or turn away?" The humans whisper. The silver sands of Valerian 5 whispered beneath Nix Valiante's boots as he paced the landing platform for the 7th time that morning. The air shimmered like liquid glass, a result of the planet's unique atmospheric composition that bent light in subtle, disorienting ways. As the colony's lead xenolinguist, Nix had spent 3 years preparing for this day, the arrival of the first official Lyridian envoy. Dr. Valiante called Commander Eliza Stern from the communication station. "The shuttle has entered our atmosphere." "ETA 11 minutes. Nix nodded, adjusting the translator device at his wrist. At 34, he'd devoted his life to understanding communication systems that defied human conception. The Lyridians, with their bioluminescent language, represented his greatest challenge yet. "Remember the protocols," Stern continued, her voice tight with the weight of diplomatic responsibility. "No sudden movements, limited facial expressions, and for God's sake maintain proper distance until invited otherwise." "I've read the briefing 86 times, Commander," Nix replied, his eyes fixed on the pearlescent sky. "The Lyridians communicate primarily through light patterns beneath their skin. They perceive our facial expressions as we might perceive shouting." The approaching shuttle glinted in the distance, descending with graceful precision. Unlike the bulky human vessels, Lyridian crafts moved with fluid elegance, their biomechanical design still beyond human engineering capabilities. When the craft settled onto the platform, the assembled welcoming committee held their collective breath. The ship's membrane-like door dissolved rather than opened, revealing a slender figure silhouetted against the interior light. She stepped forward, the Lyridian envoy. Nyx's years of preparation hadn't prepared him for the reality of her presence. Thera, as she would later introduce herself, stood slightly taller than an average human. Her skin held a deep purple undertone that shifted subtly with each movement. Like oil on water, beneath that surface patterns of light pulsed in rhythmic sequences, her native language made visible. Her features were almost human enough to be unsettling. Large, lidless eyes with violet irises, a narrow nose, and lips that seemed perpetually curved in something like contemplation. "Welcome to New Horizon Base," Nyx said carefully, the translator at his wrist converting his words into pulses of light projected toward the visitor. Thera's skin rippled with responsive patterns, which his device interpreted. "I bring greetings from the Lyridian confluence. I am Thera, diplomatic interpreter of the Third Sphere." Her actual voice, when she spoke aloud for the first time, surprised everyone. It was melodic, but with harmonic undertones that human vocal cords could never produce. "I have studied your auditory language," she said in carefully measured English, though it lacks dimension. Nyx couldn't help the smile that formed. "Perhaps that's why I've dedicated my life to understanding languages beyond human limitations." A flutter of light cascaded across Thera's neck and cheeks, a reaction his translator couldn't quite capture. Later, he would learn it was amusement. The following days passed in carefully orchestrated diplomatic exchanges. Nyx's role as linguistic liaison meant long hours with Thera, calibrating translation systems and establishing communication protocols. The standard xenological approach emphasized distance and objectivity, but Nyx found himself increasingly fascinated by the subtle variations in Thera's luminescent patterns. "Your light language changes when we discuss abstract concepts," he noted one evening in the research dome, where prismatic walls allowed for optimal observation of Lyridian communication. "Abstract thoughts require deeper patterns," Thera explained, a ripple of indigo flowing beneath her skin. "Your device captures words, but not essence." "Essence?" Nyx leaned forward, his scientific curiosity piqued. "The true meaning beneath meaning." Thera's eyes fixed on his with unsettling intensity. "For my people, true understanding requires proximity, vulnerability." Her skin dimmed slightly. "Your kind keeps distance, even from each other," Nyx considered this, perhaps because vulnerability frightens us. A new pattern bloomed across Thera's face, one his translator couldn't interpret. Later, he would recognize it as the first moment of genuine connection between them, transcending their respective protocols. "Then we have that in common, Dr. Valiante," she said softly, "the fear of being truly seen." As the twin suns of Alarian 5 set beyond the horizon, casting the research dome in amber light, neither human nor Lyridian realized they had taken their first steps on a path that would forever change the relationship between their worlds. 3 weeks into the diplomatic mission, Nyx found himself defending Thera's cultural practices to Commander Stern for the third time that week. "The Earth Council is getting impatient," Stern said, scrolling through the latest transmission. "They expected a preliminary treaty draft by now." "Lyridian diplomacy doesn't work on human timelines," Nyx replied, gesturing to his notes. "Their concept of agreement requires emotional consensus, not just intellectual." The commander's face tightened. "We're not here for a cultural exchange, Doctor. We're here to secure mining rights to the Northern Hemisphere." "With respect, Commander, that attitude is precisely why previous attempts at negotiation failed." Nyx stood his ground. "The Lyridians perceive intention as clearly as words. If we approach this as transactional rather than relational, we'll never gain their trust." After Stern reluctantly left his lab, Nyx rubbed his temples and turned to find Thera standing in the doorway, her skin pulsing with subtle violet patterns that his translator interpreted as concern. "You defend my people's ways," she observed, moving into the room with that characteristic fluid grace. "Even against your own leadership," Nyx smiled wearily. "Understanding precedes agreement." "I'm just doing my job. Is that all it is?" Thera asked, the patterns beneath her skin shifting to a deeper purple hue. The translator beeped with uncertainty, displaying nuanced inquiry, exact meaning unclear. This happened increasingly often, moments when the technology failed to bridge the gap between their forms of expression. Nyx had begun to recognize certain patterns through observation alone, though he kept this development out of his official reports. "Would you teach me?" he asked suddenly. Not just the formal light language, but how you truly communicate with your own kind. Thera's luminescence brightened, rippling across her features in what Nyx had come to recognize as surprise. Such learning requires... She paused, searching for the right word. Intimacy. Proximity that your protocols forbid. I'm willing to adapt our protocols, Nyx replied, for the sake of genuine understanding. That evening began their real work together. In the privacy of the research dome, with surveillance systems discreetly powered down, Thera taught Nyx the fundamental principle of Lyridian communication, that distance distorted meaning. Our ancestors evolved in deep waters, she explained, standing closer to him than protocol allowed. Light diminishes over distance. To truly understand one another, we must be near enough to see the subtle variations. Nyx watched transfixed, as she demonstrated patterns too delicate for his equipment to detect, ripples of light that flowed like whispered secrets beneath her purple skin. May I? He asked, raising his hand toward her arm, stopping short of actual contact. Thera nodded, her luminescence pulsing with what he now recognized as anticipation. Nyx moved his hand slowly along her arm, not touching, but close enough to feel the warmth radiating from her skin. The pattern shifted in response to his proximity, creating new constellations of meaning. Your presence changes the patterns, she explained softly. Each being elicits unique expressions from us. It is why we cannot truly communicate through recordings or transmissions. So every conversation is unique to the individuals involved. Nyx mused. Unrepeatable, yes, Thera's eyes met his. With my people, there is no such thing as casual conversation. Each exchange reveals something of ourselves that cannot be hidden. As days stretched into weeks, Nyx began to understand why the Lyridians covered their skin when among strangers. Their natural communication was too revealing, too honest for diplomatic posturing. What humans achieved through carefully chosen words and controlled expressions, Lyridians accomplished through layers of translucent garments that muted their luminescent language. Each evening, as they worked together, Thera would remove one layer of her ceremonial coverings, allowing Nyx to observe more complex patterns. She taught him to recognize joy, curiosity, concern, emotions that transcended species boundaries despite their different expressions. One night, as Ilarian V's moons cast prismatic light through the dome, Thera explained the most sacred aspect of her people's communication. To be completely understood, she said, her voice barely above a whisper, is to be completely uncovered. It is why we reserve such vulnerability for those we trust absolutely. Nyx understood then that what humans might view as physical intimacy, Lyridians experienced as emotional transparency. The implications made him reconsider every assumption about cross-species diplomacy. Your people have been misinterpreting us, he realized aloud. When Lyridian delegates refused to remove their outer garments during negotiations, they were refusing vulnerability with those who had not earned trust, Thera confirmed, a pattern of sadness flowing across her features. It was not rejection, but protection. As the first phase of their diplomatic mission approached its conclusion, Nyx received an encrypted message from Earth. Accelerate negotiations by any means necessary. The resource rights to Ilarian 5 were deemed essential to humanity's expansion. Looking at Thera across the research dome, watching the complex patterns that revealed her thoughts more honestly than any human could express, Nyx made a decision that would alter the course of both their lives. He deleted the message without response, the celestial event known as the prismatic convergence occurred only once every 73 years on Ilarian 5, as the planet's 3 moons aligned perfectly with its binary stars. The atmosphere transformed into a canvas of spectral light. We must observe this from outside, Thera insisted, her skin pulsing with excitement that made the translator device chime continuously. In my culture, to witness the sky colors together is significant. Nyx obtained special permission from Commander Stern, who reluctantly agreed under the justification of cultural exchange essential to diplomatic progress. The truth, that Nyx simply couldn't bear to deny Thera this experience remained unspoken. They ventured beyond the settlement dome just before sunset, following a path through silver dunes that shifted like liquid mercury beneath their feet. Thera wore fewer layers than usual, her skin's purple luminescence visible through the translucent outer garment she retained. My ancestors believed the Convergence reveals our true nature to the universe, she explained as they climbed a crystalline formation that offered an unobstructed view of the horizon. When the boundaries between light and darkness blur, so too do the boundaries between beings. As the celestial bodies aligned overhead, the sky erupted in waves of color that defied human classification. Ribbons of light danced across the atmosphere, reflecting off the silver landscape until it seemed they stood within a multi-dimensional prism. "It's incredible," Nix whispered, momentarily forgetting his scientific detachment. Beside him, Thera's skin responded to the spectacle with symphonies of light that his translator couldn't begin to interpret. She noticed him watching and smiled, a gesture she'd adopted from human expression. "Your device cannot translate what I'm expressing," she said. "Some meanings exist beyond technology's reach." "Then explain it to me," Nick said, turning to face her fully.
"Help me understand." Thera was quiet for a moment, her luminescence pulsing in contemplative patterns.
"In moments of profound beauty, my people share rather than explain. May I show you?" When Nix nodded, she carefully removed her outer garment, revealing more of her bioluminescent skin than he had yet seen. The patterns flowing across her form were hypnotic, complex cascades of light that seemed to respond not just to the celestial display, but to his presence. "What you're seeing is my emotional response," she explained softly, "not just to the convergence, but to sharing it with you." Nix found himself speechless. The sophisticated patterns flowing beneath her purple skin communicated something far beyond words, a resonance of wonder, appreciation, and connection that transcended their biological differences. "I've studied 7 non-human languages," he finally said, his voice uncharacteristically vulnerable, "but I've never encountered expression this beautiful." A new pattern bloomed across Thera's features, one he hadn't seen before. His translator flashed uncertainly before displaying, "Profound emotional response. Contextual meaning suggests appreciation, affection." "Among my people," Thera said, "sharing the convergence creates a bond that cannot be broken. We become witnesses to each other's true nature." As the spectacle continued overhead, Nix found himself sharing things he'd never told another being. His childhood isolation as a linguistic prodigy, his difficulty connecting with other humans despite his expertise in communication, his sense that he'd always been studying languages to find one that could fully express his inner world. "Perhaps," Thera suggested, her luminescence pulsing gently, "you were preparing to understand my people all along." "Or just you," Nix replied before he could censor himself. The patterns across her skin shifted instantly, intensifying in a way that made his translator shut down completely, overwhelmed by the complexity of her response. They sat in silence as the moons continued their celestial dance. No longer needing technology to mediate their connection, something fundamental had shifted between them, something neither human protocol nor Lyridian tradition had anticipated. When they finally returned to the settlement, Commander Stern was waiting, her expression severe. "We've received new directives from Earth," she announced without preamble. "The diplomatic approach is changing. They're sending a military attaché to oversee final negotiations." Nix felt Thera tense beside him, her skin dimming noticeably. "When?" he asked, already calculating how this would affect the trust he'd carefully built. "Transport arrives in 3 days." Stern's gaze shifted to Thera. "The Council feels we've been too accommodating to Lyridian customs." After Stern departed, Thera's luminescence pulsed with patterns Nix recognized as concern. "Your leaders do not understand what they risk," she said quietly. "Forced negotiations will fail. My people will withdraw completely." Nix took a risk, reaching out to gently touch her arm, the first direct contact they'd shared. "I won't let that happen." The pattern that spread from his touch was unlike anything he'd seen before, a spiraling cascade of light that seemed to emanate from somewhere deep within her. "What does that mean?" he asked, mesmerized by the display. Thera's gaze met his, violet eyes reflecting the lingering colors of the convergence. "It means you've touched more than my skin," she replied. "Some responses cannot be controlled or concealed." That night, as Nix recorded his observations in his private journal, rather than the official log, he realized he'd crossed a line from which there was no return. His scientific objectivity had been compromised. but in its place was something potentially more valuable. A genuine connection that might bridge their worlds in ways formal diplomacy never could. What he didn't record, what he barely admitted to himself, was how the sight of Thera's luminescent response to his touch had awakened something within him that had been dormant his entire life. A longing to be truly seen and understood by another being, regardless of the biological gulf between them. The military transport arrived with the dawn, its angular design a stark contrast to the organic architecture of the research outpost. Lieutenant Colonel Harlow Reed disembarked with 4 armed guards, his expression as rigid as his posture. "Dr. Valiante," he greeted Nix with a curt nod. "I've reviewed your reports. Fascinating work, but progress has been insufficient. Diplomatic relations can't be rushed," Nix responded, already defensive. "The Luridians have valuable resources we need," Reed interrupted. "The Council has authorized me to expedite negotiations by any means necessary." The implications hung in the air between them. Later that day, Reed called a meeting with the Luridian delegation. His approach was immediately confrontational, demanding clear timelines and concrete commitments. Thera stood silently as her companion's skin flashed with patterns that Nix recognized as alarm and indignation. When Reed demanded an immediate response to Earth's terms, the senior Luridian delegate, Merrick, removed a layer of his ceremonial garment, not as a gesture of trust, but to display a pattern that even the humans recognized as rejection. "Your method dishonors our ways," Merrick stated, his luminescence pulsing with controlled intensity. "We will withdraw until respect is restored." As the delegation prepared to depart, Nix intercepted Thera. "Please," he said quietly. "Don't leave." Her skin rippled with conflict. "I must follow my delegation." "Then I'm coming with you," he decided. "As an independent liaison." Reed's voice cut through their exchange. "That would be treason, Doctor." The next 24 hours unfolded in a flurry of confrontations. Reed placed Nix under house arrest while the Luridian delegation retreated to their compound on the far side of the settlement. Communication channels fell silent. On the second night of the standoff, as Nix paced his quarters calculating the damage to years of diplomatic work, his door slid open unexpectedly. Thera stood in the doorway, her luminescence dimmed to near invisibility. "How did you—" he began. "Your security systems are designed to detect metallic objects," she explained, entering and allowing the door to close behind her. "My people evolved without metal." She approached him slowly, her luminescence gradually brightening to reveal patterns of determination mingled with apprehension. "The delegation is preparing to leave Alarian 5 completely," she said. "This chance for understanding between our worlds will be lost." Nix felt the weight of failure pressing down on him. "I'm sorry. Reed's approach has destroyed everything we built." "Not everything," Thera countered, moving closer. "What exists between us cannot be undone by others' actions." In the soft light of his quarters, her purple skin seemed to glow from within, patterns shifting like thoughts made visible. She reached up to remove the outer layer of her attire, then paused, her eyes meeting his. "Among my people, there is a way to create a bond that transcends political concerns," she said softly. "A connection that would give you the authority to speak for me and me for you." "What kind of bond?" Nix asked, his heart racing with implications. "One of complete understanding." Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "It requires absolute vulnerability, to be seen entirely as one is." She took another step closer. "If I undress completely, removing all that dims my true communication, will you turn away? Or will you understand what I'm offering?" Nix understood the profound significance of her question. This wasn't about physical intimacy as humans conceived it, but something far more sacred to her kind. The complete revelation of self, unfiltered and unprotected. "I've been trying to understand you since the moment we met," he answered, his voice steady despite his racing pulse. "I won't turn away." Thera's luminescence brightened in response, patterns flowing across her skin in what he now recognized as profound emotion. Slowly, methodically, she removed each layer of her translucent garments until nothing diminished the complex symphony of light emanating from her being. The patterns that flowed across her unveiled form were unlike anything Nix had witnessed. Intricate, multi-layered, revealing thoughts and feelings with an honesty no human language could match. Her entire body became a canvas of communication, expressing her hopes, fears, and the depth of her connection to him with breathtaking clarity. "This is how we truly speak," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "This is who I am." Nick stepped forward, understanding the gift he was being given. "You're beautiful," he said simply, reaching out to trace the patterns of light with reverent fingers. Where he touched, new patterns bloomed, responsive, intimate expressions that needed no translation. Her luminescence seemed to intensify under his touch, creating dialogues of light that spoke of connection transcending species. "In my culture," Thera explained as their foreheads came to rest against each other, "this sharing of true self is the deepest possible bond, what your people might call a soul union." As the night deepened around them, Nyx and Thera created a new language between them, one of touch and response, of patterns recognized and understood, of barriers dissolved through willing vulnerability. Her luminescence enveloped them both, casting the room in a purple glow that pulsed with the rhythm of shared emotion. When morning came, they had transcended the boundaries of their respective species. What had been created between them could not be unmade, a bridge of understanding that would forever change both their lives.
"What happens now?"
Nyx asked as Thera prepared to return to her delegation. Her skin pulsed with certainty. "Now we show both our worlds what becomes possible when we truly see each other." The command center fell silent as Nyx entered with Thera at his side. Colonel Reed rose from his seat, his expression darkening at their unexpected appearance. "Dr. Valiante, you're confined to quarters," he barked, "and the Luridian delegate is restricted from this facility." "We've come with a proposal," Nyx replied calmly, "one that serves both our people's interests." Thera's skin pulsed with subtle patterns that Nyx now understood without need for translation. Confidence mingled with determination. She wore only a single layer of translucent material, her luminescence clearly visible beneath. "The Luridian confluence has authorized a new approach," she announced, "one based on mutual vulnerability rather than unilateral demands." Reed scoffed. "Vulnerability isn't a negotiating strategy." "It's not strategy," Nyx countered. "It's methodology, the foundation of genuine understanding." Over the next hour, they presented their unprecedented proposition, a bilateral exchange of knowledge rather than resources. The humans would gain access to Luridian biotechnology, including their revolutionary healing methods, while the Luridians would receive Earth's advancements in space travel. The mineral resources that had been Earth's primary focus would remain under Luridian stewardship, but with shared benefits from their application. "This is inadequate," Reed insisted. "The Council will never approve." "They already have," said Commander Stern, entering the room with a transmission display. "This proposal reached Earth 6 hours ago through Luridian channels. The Council voted unanimously in favor." Reed's face reddened. "How is that possible?" "It seems," Stern said, her eyes moving between Nyx and Thera, "that Dr. Valiante's unique connection with Ambassador Thera has made quite an impression on both governments." 3 months later, the Silver Shores of Valerian 5 hosted the formal ratification ceremony for what would become known as the Luminescent Accord. Representatives from both worlds gathered beneath a specially designed dome that allowed the Luridians to communicate naturally while accommodating human presence. Nyx and Thera stood at the center of it all, the living embodiment of the bridge they had built between species. They had become official co-ambassadors, recognized by both governments as the architects of a new form of diplomacy, one based on genuine connection rather than strategic advantage. As the ceremony concluded, they walked together along the shoreline where their journey had begun. Thera's luminescence danced beneath her ceremonial robes, expressing joy that Nyx could now read as easily as written words. "Did you ever imagine this outcome when we first met?" she asked, her pattern shifting to reflect playful reminiscence. "Not even close," Nyx admitted. "I thought I was coming to study a language. Instead, I found a new way of being." The twin suns began to set, casting the landscape in amber and violet hues that complemented Thera's natural coloring. She stopped, turning to face him fully. "Among my people, bonds like ours are celebrated with a ritual of light," she said, her luminescence intensifying. "Would you share this with me?" As Nyx nodded, Thera removed her outer garment, standing before him in her full, undiminished glory. The patterns flowing across her form were ones he now recognized intimately: devotion, belonging, the joy of being truly known. Nyx reached out, tracing the constellations of light that mapped her emotions. Where his fingers touched, new patterns bloomed in response. A conversation without words, a dialogue of light and touch that spoke volumes about their shared journey.